All right. The family I came from, of course, as many of the settlers in Sand Creek area were from Norway. My family, the Hoveland side, came from Telemark County, Southerners, the land of the ocean, and they, as most of them, they were hungry and overpopulated there. So they came over here. My mother's family, they all came from East Norway near the Swedish border. Consequently, their accents were a little bit different. And I mixed up the language a little bit. And I was on trips to Norway. They pointed this out to me that I was using both. Anyway, all four of my grandparents were from Norway, and they settled at Sand Creek. The original Hoveland farm was right on the road to Our Savior's church, and the Peterson lives there now, and that was the original Hoveland farm. My mother's people, they were mainly in Trout Creek, south of Sand Creek, and then my grandfather came there and settled on a farm just to the north of where I grew up. And I never knew my grandfather Nor because he died when my mother was 13, growth of throat cancer. And so my grandmother was widowed a long, long time. She was a colorful lady, a very bright lady, and outspoken. And she was willing to use her talents that way very nicely with some people. Always wonderful with me. But she was in trouble with the Lutheran pastor because she didn't come to church very much. And pastor came by to talk to her one day. I was there as a little boy. And of course, asked her, "Marn, why aren't you coming to church?" Well, she says, "You don't have anything to say I want to hear." Which, of course, was not exactly a nice thing to tell the pastor. And he persisted some more. And finally, she told him to leave. You didn't do that back then to the pastor. But he finally picked up his hat and out the door. And Grandma won. I was so proud of her that she could do that. So it was interesting. And my grandparents, the Hovelands, Søren Hoveland, was a charming storyteller. Wonderful. He was married to one of the Halverson girls. They were all beautiful, and they only had one difficulty. They were all extremely strong-willed and no sense of humor. So it was probably not the easiest marriage, but Grandpa just smiled and went on. And so it was just interesting, but they were both good to me. But Grandpa was my favorite, of course. So I grew up there on the farm there, and I enjoyed my visits to Sand Creek with him, of course, naturally. So that part was just marvelous. They helped me along in life, and as I learned a lot of stories from Grandpa. See, Grandpa Hoveland, as one of the early people in the community, not only did he farm, and very successfully, he also owned a steam engine and thresh machine, which was quite impressive at that time, and a bean thresher as well, and did work for other farmers. Also, he did an unpaid thing, and that was he was the local undertaker. And the undertaker, which of course there were none at that time, he would make the coffins out of wood when someone died, and he would dress the corpse and lay it out in the thing for a funeral. And of course, obviously, he had some wonderful tales to tell me about how these corpses sometimes moved, and things of that sort, probably embellished enormously. But, I was so delighted to hear these things, except it scared the daylights out of me. I couldn't possibly walk by a cemetery at night. No. And things like that. But now you're probably wondering about me speaking Norwegian. My parents knew English. That wasn't the problem. But at home, we always used it. And I grew up as an only child and didn't have any other children to play with before I went to school. And there were no other children living on farms around me. So basically, I grew up alone. And I became kind of a daydreamer, and I kind of enjoyed being alone. And I was a real trial to my mother, a really awful kid. I ran away from home frequently as a little boy. Worst of all, I found it was great fun to take my fist and push it through a window. It made a lot of noise. And if I did it right, I didn't get any pain or anything. It didn't hurt myself. But of course, it wasn't exactly a thing to do to the windows in the living room and where elsewhere. And so they put boards across the windows to keep me from poking holes in windows. And that wasn't nice. One time I was down to my Uncle Sophus, Swanill's father, and I left them talking over coffee in the dining room, and then I went into the kitchen, and the next thing they found me as a little boy standing on the counter taking toothpicks and throwing them all over the room. Had wonderful time. They were not pleased. But there I was. That's the kind of kid I was, until I finally taught myself how to read in Norwegian. And after that, Mother said, I was a good boy, no problems at all. So finally I got to be a decent kid. And I grew up on the farm, working hard, as other children did. I was not unique. And that was just the way it was. And those lessons of hard work on the farm, they were great for me the rest of my life. Nothing in my working career ever was hard after that.
Tell us about school.
Okay. My school, I did not go to school in Sand Creek because it was further away than the county line school, which actually the building was located across the line in Barron County, but it served the children in both counties. And it had 8 grades in one room. I had, over the course of my 8 years there, I had 5 different teachers, all of them good except one, and one of them was absolutely super, outstanding, fresh out of normal school. How that young woman did it. Ruth Harlested was absolutely out of this world. She married one of my cousins and became a relative. Things like that. Now in school, unlike a lot of the boys, I loved school. I loved to read and write, which was not highly looked at by most of the boys. So I got classified with the girls, who liked to do that. But that didn't matter to me. I just enjoyed it. And I got a good education there. It was not bad at all. I was well prepared for high school when I left that school. So people would say you can't get a good education in a one-room school. Wrong. It did work, and it was cheap. But and we had a lot of fun there. We really did. And of course, they had to raise money for the Christmas program, and money was short, the Depression, but they held a basket social, usually about in October. It attracted lots of people, and girls would prepare a basket of some fancy food of some kind, and then they'd auction them off, these decorated things. The young men would bid on them, you know. Because sometimes they got a basket with a girl they really didn't like. And then if they had some suspicion that it was on some girl they really liked, the bidding went up and up and up. So it was fun. And of course, our school had a pipe furnace from the basement, came up to the front of the room, which meant that it was hot up there in the winter and desperately cold at the other end, where I often sat, and we had a draft along the floor. So you sat on your put your feet underneath your rear end to keep it warm. It was smart, and it was cold. And of course, if you left your lunches in the entryway, they were still frozen from your walk to school or skiing to school. But so we also brought our lunch boxes in and put them up around the register from the furnace in the front, have them warmed up for lunchtime. And at lunchtime, at noon hour, we would rush out, gobble our food, and then rush out to go ski on that little hill beside the schoolhouse. That was fun. And we'd start at the top and go down the hill, and we'd steer among the trees coming down, which was stupid but fun. As far as I recall, nobody ever got injured. I'm amazed at that. But that was great fun. And then, of course, we played games of various kinds on the snow. That was another recreation in winter. No, it was a good place. When I graduated from there, went on to high school, everything was fine.
Where did you go to high school?
I went on to high school in Tech, which I loved. And I was so awed with the size of the library. It really wasn't all that big, but oh, I thought it was marvelous. And of course, at Tech High School, I had some good teachers, including the best teacher I ever had anywhere, even in universities, and that was Lily Sauer, originally Ahlgren, whose parents came from Sweden as immigrants and were farmers in northern Wisconsin, near Frederick. She was absolutely out of this world as a teacher. And I owe a lot to that lady. But there were other good teachers too, don't get me wrong. It was great. And my experiences there were fine, no problem. And then because of my father's difficulties, he insisted the bus routes changed a bit, and I would have had to walk out to the corner by where the Nasses lived, and in the mornings and wait for the bus. And he said, "No, you're not going to do that. It's too cold out there. Stand out there." Colfax said, "We'll send the bus right to your house." Ooh. So Pa says, "That's the way it's going to be, period." Even though I objected. Didn't matter to me. Him. Well, it was crushing to be torn away from old friends at Tech High School. That was not easy for a teenage kid like me. And I made it. And even worse off was this bus. I was the first one on in the morning and the last one to get home. So the bus ride was the longest of all. It was not a good situation. And I was most unhappy. In fact, I was about ready to drop out of school. Kids do dumb things sometimes, but I was angry. But I graduated. Then Pa figured I would stay on the farm with him because I could farm with him. Well, even at that age, I knew farming with him was not going to be a good deal because what ended up, he'd be the boss and I'd be the hired man, period. I would not have no input. I recognized that. But I didn't know what to do. I really wanted to go to school somewhere at the university. And my cousin Frederick, who was the youngest Hanson boy, my cousins, he was at the university and working on his master's, and he wanted me to come to school. So he came over and talked to Mother and my father and said, "You need to come with me. I'm driving back to Madison, and you need to come to summer school." "Oh, no," Pa says, "you can't go." He says, because I got to have somebody to help paying in the summer. This isn't going to work. Well, of course, I had no input there. And Frederick tried to convince him, of course, didn't do any good. So Carl stood up to my father and said, "Carl is going to the university." He looked at her. "Well, we need him here." "Doesn't matter," says Mother. "He's going to the university, and I'm going to the field, take his place." That was touching for me. And sure enough, I went to the university, and they got along, and Pa was disappointed, no question. But an 80-acre farm, my prospects were not good, and he figured we could do custom work for other people, and I wasn't interested in driving tractor plowing for other farmers. That didn't interest me much. Not that I disliked farming, because I enjoyed the cows, I really did. But there was a time And my mother saved me, and I'm indebted to her.
So what did you do for college?
I went to the University of my education, I went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison. My mother...
Oh, what year?
I went there in 1945 when I graduated from high school. The war was still going on, and there's where I spent my time, and working part-time, because my father did not supply any money. He thought it was a waste of time, money going to university. Well, so I had 3 part-time jobs, and I survived, but I saw these other people coming home from the military and getting GI Bill, $50 a month in their books. And I had to hustle. I decided that this wasn't real smart. So I was going to enlist in the military, not for patriotic reasons, but to get the GI Bill. That's pretty mercenary, I know, but that's the way it was. So anyway, I hunted around to see, well, I wanted to serve as little short a time as I could. And I wanted really the Navy or the Air Force. Well, they had all 4-year enlistments. That wasn't good. So then I decided, I'm going to go somewhere else. So, of course, the Army, they had 2-year enlistment, but I was afraid I'd get in the infantry or something like that. And Carl didn't want to get killed. The war was still going. So I decided, Marine Corps, they had an option. You could go into Marine Aviation. I thought, that's for me, a 2-year enlistment. Carl became a Marine, which sounds impressive, but it wasn't much. I was just there and went through boot camp, and then I went to a clerk typist school, graduated, topped the class there, which did me a lot of good later. And I got a job. I was secretary to a bird colonel from Beloit, Wisconsin, of all things. Very lovely man, and that was great. And I served my career there, and they let us out a little early, so I got out after about 20 months, box sergeant rank. Of all things, I was pushed along too far, I know, but the colonel was good to me. And then I came back to school with a GI Bill. Everything was great. And the government did me a great deal of good, helped me out immensely. So then I went on there and got my bachelor's and then my master's degree, and then took a job in Southwest Texas, near the Mexican border, for 3 years. So anyway, that was my first job.
What was your field of study?
My field of study was in agronomy. Initially it was soils, and then I enjoyed it, but in my work in Southwest Texas on irrigated pastures, I discovered that was my real love with grasslands and pastures. So I switched, and then when I went to the University of Florida for my doctorate, I majored in that and minored in animal nutrition, which it was fabulous. I had a superb education at Florida, and it fitted me very well for the rest of my life. And my wife, at that time, she was a farm girl from Southwest Wisconsin, grew up on a dairy farm, milking cows by hand, just like me, and so we were well suited to each other. And so we grew up together, and she went to school part-time down there and also worked as a registered nurse, and we had a great time. And then we went from there to Auburn University in Alabama for my first job, and I served 22 years on the faculty there. And then I was bought over by the University of Georgia to move over there, and I was on the faculty there for 25 years. And when I graduated, had such great fun. Got to travel all over the world in my work, and I've been blessed immensely. But again, as I say, Sand Creek was the root of it, no question.
Very good. So tell us about some of the businesses that were in Sand Creek when you were growing up.
Oh, well, Sand Creek, in contrast to now, was really a very busy town. It had things moving. And when you consider the countryside was just covered with small dairy farms. And all these people had incomes coming in from dairying, and they spent it, of course, in Sand Creek. Instead of people going to shopping in Chetek and Rice Lake and elsewhere, they shopped in Sand Creek because Sand Creek had 3 grocery stores. 3, which is pretty impressive for a town of its size. And the farmer's store was a big store. It was part of a chain in this region. And they had all sorts of things, all the way from dry goods, groceries, meats, and all sorts of overalls and shoes and the whole bit. And then, of course, they also had farm machinery parts as well. So it was quite a large operation there. Then, of course, Selmer Severson, farm boy from Pine Creek, he started a little store there. Everybody wondered whether he was going to make it or not. Selmer, he did very well. He was very frugal, hardworking, and both he and his wife, and they were highly successful in this little store. And then down the hill, at the bottom of the hill, was Mrs. Werman's store, which was originally an IGA, and then it became a red and white, and I'm not sure something else too, but later on. And then, of course, the big thing there was the creamery. And that employed a number of people, and of course it took milk from farmers in the region. And of course back then you had these milk haulers hauling cans of milk in from the farms, and these milk haulers came in over much of the day really, but certainly in the mornings, and they serviced their trucks at Conrad Gilbert's station right adjacent. And Conrad had a thriving business there, and he worked hard. And he had a little garage as well as the gasoline tires. And then the other thing is they had bellies to fill too. So they went down to the Sand Creek Cafe, which was another very busy place back then with the haulers come in. If they're early in the morning, they'd have to have coffee and a piece of pie, homemade pie. But then at noon, they'd have dinner there. No, not lunch, because that was dinner. We had supper back then, not a dinner at night. And then, so that was a busy place. And then down the street, of course, it was a bank in town, a branch of the New Auburn Bank, and that was a busy place. And then right next to the bank was a garage run by my Uncle Art Hoveland. And he was a very good mechanic, excellent. He could repair anything. And the problem was Uncle Art and the bottle had a love affair. And he was an alcoholic, a very nice alcoholic, because he just was happy when he had a little bit. Well, where did he get his drink? Because since Sand Creek was dry, that was easy. He had a bootlegger that brought it in milk cans. It was interesting. I as a child, at first I didn't know what was going on back there, and I see these cans coming in the back there that he had, and of course he had some customers there in town too, and that was interesting. But anyway, so unfortunately, he imbibed too much, and in the end, he finally had the business failed. But it was the best garage. It was a good garage. It had a lot of business. But that was it. Then you had a feed mill just outside of town, and it was powered by water power from a dam there. And that was a busy place. And again, farmers brought their corn and oats in from their dairy farms to have the ground. And I enjoyed going there as a kid with my pa because it was such a fun place to be, for lots of stuff to see and people telling stories, which is always wonderful. Lots of lies going around. That's fun. So that was it there. And then, of course, down the street, or on the main street, barber shop, a very busy place. Saturday night, it was loaded. the people. Bill Lyons ran this thing. Bill was a colorful fellow, absolutely colorful, and outspoken, and always smoking cigarettes, always had a lit cigarette every time. I don't know whether he died of cancer or not, but he certainly had the potential for it. It was an interesting story about him there. People like to play tricks on him. Well, there was one time there, he always had several bottles of wine there that he would drink by himself at times. Well, several of the young guys said, oh, we're going to play a trick on him. So one day, I guess it was late Saturday night or something like that, they said, Bill, we'd like to treat you. We've been mean to you, we know that. We'd like to. So they brought out a couple bottles of wine, I guess it was 2, 3 maybe, and said, we're going to share. Oh, boy, Bill thought, this is nice. These guys are finally going to be nice to me at the end. Well, they drank together and had a good party. And then, I guess, I don't know, it was the next week, he looked in his cabinet to find the wine. It was all gone. He had drunk his own wine. He was furious. And he'd shared it with these jerks. So that was one of the little stories there. And then there were 2 blacksmith shops in town. For a while there was only one, but they were busy places. Farmers brought in parts to be welded, and plowshares had to be added on to. People didn't throw plowshares away. They welded on a new piece back then, the Depression era. So that was an interesting thing too. And it was fun as a child to be there because the nice smell, I always thought that was a wonderful smell from a forge. And then the smoke and the color and the sounds of the hammers beating on the anvils. Colorful place. Blacksmiths, his overalls were always covered with black stuff and everything. And I thought, oh, that was pretty impressive. It's kind of like the milk haulers. I was elated to watch them. And little boys always admired these. These were heroes because here they were. They wore a leather apron, and then they also had a big, wide leather belt around their bellies. And that was, of course, lifting those heavy cans of milk out of the water tanks. It was easy to get a hernia, and this was supposed to protect against a hernia. I don't know whether it did or not, but anyway, that was the idea. But we thought this as a marked distinction. And lots of little boys wanted to be a milk hauler. That was a big deal, like one today maybe being a pilot or something, of a plane. So it was an interesting era.
Any other businesses?
Yes, other businesses. Yes, down the street, we had a corner across from Warman's store was different things. There was a garage there for a while. Ing Hansen ran this place. It also had a gas station as well. And that was a busy place. He also had a trucking. He owned several big trucks. And they hauled, some of them hauled cattle, but usually it was other items that they hauled for farmers, transport. He was quite an enterprising guy, he really was. And then, let's see, there was, oh yes, we had Ole Engen. Ole Engen, another Norwegian that had great skills as a cabinet maker. And now, to be truthful about it, there was not great demand for a fine cabinet maker in Sand Creek. People didn't need that kind of stuff. They wouldn't pay for it. So the man, to use his skills and make a living, he had to do repair work and wooden work for farmers. And of course, that was a little bit degrading for him, but he did it. He was also a misfit because he didn't quite, he was quite a deep thinker. And you might call him a philosopher. And he and the church didn't get on well together. It was, well, strained, to say the least. And, but he was interesting to know. And I was too young to appreciate what he had to say. Paul got a kick out of listening to him. and probably learned a lot from him. But he made my first skis, and they were nice skis. I learned to ski on those things at an early age, and I used them a long time till they got to be too small for me, and I had to get bigger ones. But I'm not sure, I don't think he made my next skis. I think I bought them somewhere else. But they weren't nearly as good as those first ones I had. They were nice. And and then, of course, we had in town there, at various times, of course, oh yes, the parsonage was there in town for Our Savior's Lutheran Church on the south side. And then the parsonage, of course, for Zion was right near the Zion Lutheran Church on the north side of the town. And the interesting thing between the churches was that the Lutheran Free Church was much more restricted in their beliefs than Our Savior's, which was the old Norwegian Synod, much like the state church in Norway, with the very liturgical service and the pastor wearing the old cassock and a long robe, which was very sinful in the Lutheran Free Church. In the Lutheran Free Church, the pastor had a striped pants and gray pants and a black long-tailed coat. I don't know why, but that was the uniform that they had. And usually these pastors tend to be much more talkative about sin than in the other church. And there was a lot of guilt put on people there. And but it was a cordial place in many ways. And as a boy growing up, of course, as a little boy in the church, the lengthy sermons went on and on. But I had to entertain myself. So entertaining myself was, what does a little boy do? Sitting in church next to Mama, and Mama didn't put up with foolishness. She didn't. Ma had I couldn't bring a book with me. You can look at the hymn book if you like, but that isn't exactly great interest to a little boy. And then, so you've discovered that underneath the seat, the pew, there's all kinds of old gum under there. It's been stuck there for a long time. That's kind of interesting. And particularly in summer, that was a good time because then there were usually some bugs around, ladybugs. They were kind of fun to watch, and I used to think that was interesting to do. Or maybe some bees had come into church. For a while we didn't have screens on the windows, but later we did. And that brought in a lot of interesting things. And then, of course, you could look around. I was sitting on the end of the pew, fortunately, and I could look around. I couldn't look up because sitting in front of us was Henry Anderson, and he had a big head. I couldn't see through him. Of course, you could just see the pulpit anyway, so it didn't make much difference. And also, there was one of the pastors we had that always took his watch out, laid it down. I don't think he ever looked at it because it didn't seem to make any difference how long he talked. But anyway, that was it. But anyway, looking around as a child, and if it was another kid across the aisle, you could make faces at each other. That was pretty good too, interesting. And then you could look around to see if there was anybody asleep. And there was always some men. I mean, women didn't go to sleep. I don't know why, but they didn't. They were more attentive. And then probably the best time I ever had during sermon time was we had a choir. Josie Severson, Gilbert Severs, Gilbert was the choir director, and his wife played the organ. It was a pump deal back then, and you had to pump vigorously to keep it going. And so the choir back there, of course, was composed of local farmers, and one of them was Clifford Nelson. Clifford was an interesting fellow. He was a local farmer, but he sang in the choir. And one day, there was a big fly sometimes you'd see these enormous flies. And he came and parked himself right near me. Didn't like me much, I guess, so he took off again. And then he flew around different places, finally headed toward the choir. And over in the choir, as usual, Clifford was asleep. And when he went to sleep, he leaned his head back up against the wall, and of course his mouth finally popped open. And then, this day, the big fly was looking around. Finally, he apparently saw this big cavern, and flew in and walked in. And as probably the saliva attracted him, and all at once, Clifford closed his mouth. And of course, Carl broke out in bold laughter in the pew. Mama slapped me on the shoulder hard, because she missed out on this wonderful thing that I'd seen. And I couldn't understand why she didn't appreciate it, but she did. And that was the best sermon I ever had. We're taught, some by women, and then usually older children. There were male teachers. Norman Anderson was one teacher that tried his best under difficult circumstances, was dealing with little boys like me, but I was not the ringleader of things. Some of my partners there, that they eventually ended up in my confirmation class, all boys. And so then we had a number of them in there, like Wesley Paulson, and then there was, but the two smartest ones, and probably the cleverest of all, was Virgil Van Gelder and Edsel Peterson. They were brilliant guys, both of them, and clever as could be. So it was so much fun in Sunday school, particularly if you had girls in there. You could pull things, if they had braids, you could pull things, ribbons off there, that would be fun. And another one was if a kid had a cap, grab the cap and just slide it under and back of you several places. And of course that created some nice fun in there. But the big thing was in the questions. So, because they would ask these impossible questions during the teaching, and the poor teacher trying to keep order. And then, of course, you get, I remember one time, they had the text of the sower dropping seed on stony ground and other ground, and finally on good soil. And this one little kid says, "No good farmer is going to put seed out on rocky land. It doesn't make any sense." And of course, that got a few laughs in there. And then, of course, another one was when a good shepherd, if one of his lambs is missing, and you go and you leave your other flock and you go and hunt, and this kid spoke up and said, "That's dumb." He says, "Nobody's going to go off and leave the whole flock just for one little lamb. Coyotes or dogs might come and take the others." And of course, what's the farmer going to do telling him that, answering it? So that's things like that. And of course, and then of course one of the choice ones that had to come up is, why is it that Jesus was made wine in the Bible, but we don't have wine at communion? We have grape juice. Well, that, of course, he didn't have a good answer for this, except finally he says, the wine that they had back in the Bible didn't have alcohol in it. I don't think that went over too well. But it was stuff like that. It was calculated to waste time in Sunday school. That's exactly what it was. And they succeeded. So we didn't get a lot of education in Sunday school, unfortunately. But we did have fun, and that was good. And But I was not a ringleader on it, but I enjoyed it immensely. I'm sorry I talked too much.
You're wonderful.
Thank you. A significant factor in my childhood, as it was in other residents. We were more fortunate than many, but some of it was because of my father's managerial skills. You see, in the 1920s, farming was good. They made money. And unfortunately, there were many farmers that bought bigger farms, more land, and big mortgages. And then, with high milk prices, they were doing fine. And then came the crash, and the milk prices also plunged, and they had to pay back those mortgages with pitiful milk prices. It was impossible. So they lost their farms. There were a lot of farmers that lost their farms. And that was serious, it was tragic, but it happened. Sand Creek many banks collapsed because it made too many of these worthless loans. Sand Creek Bank survived, and fortunately those people that had deposits there did not lose money, which was remarkable. And my father had a nice account there, and that money was safe. In the Depression, the early part of the Depression didn't affect me. As a child, I didn't notice anything. But as it progressed, it began to tell. And there's one other thing that added to our woes. Not only were milk prices low, but we had a number of years with extreme droughts. And these droughts were devastating. And of course, we had no irrigation at that time. And you had pastures and hay and silage corn to worry about. Well, with no water, you didn't do it. So what we ended up doing, many of the farmers, like my father, they sent their cows to northern Wisconsin. They've rented an old farm where it was raining and put them on poor pastures. And they had a member of the family working there, milking the cows during the summer. And we'd make visits there. And we did that several years. And it was not a good way to make any money, but at least the cows survived. And of course, then you had to buy feed for the next winter. That was tough. That cut us down. Of course, on the farm, we had no problem. As a child, I had plenty to eat. That was not it. You just didn't have any money, that's all. And clothing, of course, was very limited. And new clothes, just forget that. So when you got a new pair of overalls, that was a pretty good deal. And so it was things like that, but it didn't cause suffering for us. And of course, Pa had also had a sawmill doing custom work for other farmers, and he had lumber to sell as well from our little woods. And that brought in a little cash. And then, of course, he did custom work for other farmers with his threshing machine and sometimes some other equipment. That brought in a little money as well. So we survived. And then, of course, he had his money in the bank. The thing that hit us hard, and really hard, was a state TB test went through, requiring all cows to be tested for TB. We had a very fine Guernsey herd, not purebreds, but he was a member of the testing association, and they were high quality and high performance cows. And Pa had a cattle buyer friend of his, and this cattle buyer friend said, "Herman, would you take care of this bull I've got? I got a really good bull," he says, "that carry him over the winter. Just take care of him, and you can use him for your herd." Well, that was a pretty good deal, Pa. For breeding, this would be nice. So he did, took it. The problem was that this bull was infected with TB and infected the whole darn herd except for, I think, one or two cows that did not. Well, of course, selling these cows for tankage doesn't bring in any money. It was disastrous. So therefore, not only had we lost the cows, but we'd lost our income. No milk. Now what do we do? So he had to start buying cows again to replenish the herd. We had all colors he bought, including many breeds, brown Swiss, Ayrshire, and who knows what. Building it back slowly to have some income. That was tough, really tough. And we were down to the point that Pa even had to borrow a little money from the bank. That was crushing for him because debt to him, not only was it bad, it was a sin. It was a sin. And that infected me too. In my own life, I avoided debt at all costs. In fact, I have never bought a car on credit. Always cash. It's almost unreasonable to think so today, but that was what I did. It was probably not smart, but that's my beginning. And frugality has been part of my lifestyle, yes. I've enjoyed life, but within reason. So save and invest. My father said, you always want to live below your income, not up to it. And he couldn't conceive of living beyond your income, as many people do. I remember one Christmas, right? I guess it was a Christmas, probably we'd lost the cows, I don't remember. And for Christmas Eve, he'd gone down to the farmer's store and they had frozen fish there, fresh fish from out in West Coast, Washington. And I think it was either halibut or salmon, I don't remember. And he bought this nice big fish. We brought it and he put it under the wash tub out on the little stoop outside the house. And of course, with ice and snow out there, he thought everything was fine. And I guess the day before Christmas, is going to get the fish out to throw it. Looked under there, it was gone. And there was laying in the snow, the remnants of it. Dog had gotten to it and taken our Christmas Eve. He had tears in his eyes. That was it. Our Christmas was devastated. I'm not sure what we did. We had something, a chicken probably or something. Go out and cut a head off a chicken and probably had that. But that was that stands out as something tough. But we survived and made it okay. And milking cows, I enjoyed that. Some people didn't like it, but I didn't care much for the mechanical parts. You see, my father was a very good mechanic. He could fix anything. He had the mind of an engineer, only with a 7th grade education, and he could do arithmetic, which I was dumb at. Mathematics had never been kind to me. But he could fix anything, and he could not understand this son of his, who had no mechanical skills, just like his mother, hopeless. And on the farm, you just aren't like that. That's not right. Well, I just wasn't suited for him on that score. But anyway, we managed. But when it came to taking care of the cows, I liked that. And nothing better than sitting down beside a cow to milk a hand, especially in cold morning. It felt so good to sit beside that cow, put your head into that warm flank, and then put your cold hands on the tits of that warm cow. That was living. That was luxury. One of the little pleasures of life. Ours were small. So it was one of those glorious things. But there were many things. During the Depression, I had no problem with pleasure, things like that. Sunday afternoons, I'd often go down to the river, and I'd sit there along the river. The red cedar is beautiful, simply lovely. Just down by our farm there. And I'd often just sit there and daydream and look at the scenery, the squirrels or something, and I was quite content. I really was. And we have a bench down there dedicated to our parents, their memory, about where I used to sit. And so anyway, that was good. No, we didn't go fishing. I didn't go fishing on Sunday afternoon. That was prohibited. We didn't do that. No. That was folks from Chicago coming up would do that. But we didn't do that sin. Anyway, another thing with mother, I would ask one day, we went, of course, you know, that we have a large German colony settled by Germans in the Bloomer area. And we often shopped down there. And I'll never forget, the first time I was there with them, I recall these people chattering away in German. And I told them in Norwegian, "Jag kan inte förstå dessa folka. I can't understand these people." And he told me speaking German. Oh, I didn't know that. So learned that. So, but I asked Ma, why are Germans more prosperous than we are? She had a very imaginative answer for me. Well, she says, it's easy to say, because the Germans will work on Sunday, and we don't work on Sunday. And see, if the hay needed to be put up, you know, ahead of a storm or something, they would go out on Sunday and get that hay in. We didn't do that. No. That was forbidden. So that was the answer.
It was your day of rest.
Now, as far as anything, World War II, things were getting prosperous there even before the war. It was because Europe was, before we were in the war, they were buying a lot of food from us. And so milk prices rose, and a lot of new equipment on farms. And of course, we got, most of all, a milking machine, which was wonderful. And then, of course, I was getting to high school then, and that was a good time for me. And we, World War II, yes, we had gas restrictions, but however, that didn't bother too many farmers because there was an awful lot of tractor gas that went into the cars. There was no question about that. So the stamps didn't mean too much, that the ration we got. Now, I know that that wasn't done by many people, but it was common. So anyway, that was the thing. We didn't suffer too much, except tires were in tight supply. It was very hard. And of course, the tires we got were synthetic, and they were terrible. They didn't last long. And so farmers didn't have enough tires. And in fact, Carl Hoveland in Sand Creek, that lived on a farm right there in town, he hauled his milk up to the creamery in a little trailer behind his car. Well, Carl didn't have enough, couldn't get tires for his trailer, so he ran it on the rims. And of course, you can still hear him tearing along up there and then bouncing along on the paving there with that. Oh, the noise was absolutely deafening from that trailer with running on the rims. That was like Carl Hoveland. He thought that was funny. And things like that. But we managed the World War II okay. That was probably the hardest thing of all for the Norwegians there was two things being rationed: coffee and sugar, because they loved sweets. And of course, coffee was absolutely essential for being alive. I unfortunately did not care much for coffee at that time. I learned to like coffee later in life, but at that time. But Mother always had a coffee cup going in the house for herself. And that was tough, hardship. And of course, we also, in 1940, in April 1940, a great tragedy occurred when Hitler conquered Norway. And that was very, well, local people paid attention to this because the motherland, and even though they were long divorced from it, they still thought of it as that was a homeland. And for instance, I kept a map at home in which I plotted where everything was going, like even in Norway. I followed as the German army moved northward through Norway with the king there, and so in the north of the country where the British took the Norwegian crown and out of the country to England. But it was really troubling. And then, of course, then finally Pearl Harbor came, and that was the end. And scads of people, of course, went off to the military. And it changed things. Of course, you couldn't get a hired man then on a farm. They were gone. And that was tough. That was tough for a lot of people. Now, you could get a lot of new farm machinery. That was available. And that, of course, substituted for some labor. And farmers were more prosperous, and they could afford to buy new equipment then. So you found a lot of new mechanization during World War II on farms throughout the area. And, of course, other things, too, were in great demand, other food products, and that was going on. But other than that, no, I didn't suffer during the period at all. It was very different. Other people had it hard, but we didn't. No.
Tell us about celebrations.
What type of celebrations are you thinking of?
Well, like 4th of July
Oh,
celebrations.
4th of July in Santa Cruz. That varied. Sometimes, some years, they had big celebrations. Other times, they didn't have much of anything. I don't know why, but that was the case. Probably in the better years, they would have something down in Sand Creek Park on the river there. And they would bring in some kind of a special thing, exhibiting something. For instance, one year they had a mechanical town there. It was really quite clever in setup. And they charged admission for it, of course. And then they had some other little rides down there sometimes. They were small, but it was fun for little kids. And then, of course, they always had a speaker of some kind. And I don't know how good they were. I have no idea. Probably not a great speaker, probably a local politician, that's my guess. I know Arnold Gilbert's talked. Arnold Gilbert's had people that loved him and they hated him, one or the other, depending on what. The problem was that, see, Arnold was a Democrat, and the area was overwhelmingly Republican. And I remember Pa was, of course, a staunch Republican. And he voted for one Democrat. He was I think he was a coroner, and he was handicapped, and Pa felt sorry for him. He needed that job. And so he voted for this Democrat. That was something else. And so, of course, I knew that the only way to vote was to vote Republican, until later on I began to think, maybe there were some good ones in each party and some wretched crooks in all parties. It took me a while to learn that. And then but anyway, it was 1 year that stands out. I was probably upper grade school, somewhere along in there. And Clayton Sawston and I were walking together there around the big celebration stuff downtown. They had a parade in town, of course. And then we were intrigued with one thing they had. And just north of the schoolhouse, there was a open pasture there on which a pilot with a plane took people up for rides. You paid your money, and it was $1. I think it was $1 for a ride. So that wasn't exactly that. But we didn't have much money. The two of us were a little short of cash. And I think, so finally we wanted to ride. Oh, we wanted to go up on that ride. It would have been so exciting. So we went to the pilot, who didn't have any business right then, and said, would you take both of us up for $1? Because we could get $1 together between the two of us. So he said, and he hesitated a little bit. Well, I think I pointed out that, well, we didn't weigh nearly as much as some people. So, yeah, I agreed with that. So, okay, he took us up. The two of us sat squeezed in this next to the pilot. I tell you, that was probably one of the most exciting rides I've ever had in a plane, because we flew over each of our farms and saw what they looked like from the air, and saw Sand Creek and the celebration down there. Oh, we lived, and we came back, and then later on, of course, Ma was wondering where we were. I said, what we've done. You could have been killed, she says. I can't imagine you going up in an airplane. That's not safe. And, Pa says that might be kind of interesting. So he didn't think it was bad at all. So, but anyway, that was our big, exciting 4th of July celebration. We saw it. Another year, I remember they had one very nice celebration. Where they took the oldest settlers in Sand Creek and they rode on a float through town. That was a big deal, including my grandpa Hoveland and grandma there. And the Myrons were on it, I know. And I think it was one of the Tysons was on there too. And I don't know, there may have been someone else. I don't recall all of them. But anyway, that was kind of exciting. And our pleasures were small. Other celebrations were, of course, as I mentioned earlier, in our schoolhouse, and all schoolhouses did it. The basket socials were social occasions. And then you would have also the Christmas thing, where you had a little Christmas program, and we all spoke a piece, or we would be in some kind of a little skit. And they had me, and always put me in some kind of a little play of some sort. There weren't much count, but anyway, the audience thought they were great. And of course, the parents were so proud when they saw their children up there on the stage. This little stage was put in front of the plate. Now, I remember one year, they had one little boy who was supposed to speak a piece up there of some kind. He got up there, he was scared to death, as many of them were. And he was sick. And the kid had, obviously, maybe flu, who knows what. But anyway, all of a sudden, he couldn't do anything. He just puked on the stage. His mama, of course, came running up there and some other women to wipe it up. Of course, there was no running water around the place, so that was a mess. And no paper towels either, by the way. So, but anyway, she took this little kid away, and that was the end of that one. But it was, a lot of things went wrong, but it was fun. They distributed the little gifts, of course. You drew names for gifts and junk like that. And my parents always had a little thing for